Of the Board of Education for Tuesday, February 25th. This meeting is now called to order. Dr. Turner, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Hull.
Here.
Dr. Blau.
Here.
Ms. Heinrich.
Here.
Myself here. Ms. Weems.
I am here.
Absent. Mr. Walker. Absent. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. And Mrs. Smith, thank you. We have a quorum. Mrs. Smith let me know that she is not feeling well just a few hours ago, so she is unable to make it, and we hope that she feels better soon. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now move to the agenda. Mrs. Heinrich.
I move to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education, Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mrs. Heinrich, seconded by Dr. Turner for the approval of the agenda. Is there any comments or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Moving on to announcements. Well, welcome back from the break. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves, and I am particularly happy to see it thawing out outside. It's all good stuff. Our board continues to be active. We had a community engagement meeting, and I look forward to hearing a report from that. And we also had a policy meeting. We will, I look forward to hearing the update from that as well. Our board is planning for its retreat in March. I look forward to continuing to work on our board goals surrounding academic achievement, financial performance, and board governance. I continue to see really great things moving in that respect, and we continue to reevaluate our goals on a regular basis and make sure that we're moving forward to attain them. With that, we will move to our first public comment. This is the period in time which you may make a public comment. You are welcome to do so. Public comment cards are in the back of the room. If you wish to make public comment, you just take a card, fill it out, and bring it to Colleen's Scripture. There's a ceramic bowl here. I'm calling for public comment twice, and I'm seeing that no one wants to make comment for the third time. There is another opportunity to make public comment at the in the middle of our agenda, so if you don't want to do it now, you may do it then. All right, we're going to move on to items from the Secretary.
Thank you. The board has received communications regarding the Office of Head Start, also a request for independent investigation. Please note that the board acknowledges communication and responds when appropriate. A list of correspondence can be found in the board packet and is accessible on the Farmington Public Schools website. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to legislative update. Dr. Blau?
I have nothing to report today.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then to district updates.
All right, thank you, President Weems. I too hope that everyone enjoyed their midwinter break. I want to start by welcoming up Mr. Brad Paddock, our Assistant Superintendent for Talent Development, to introduce to the board the new Assistant Principal at Farmington High School.
Thank you and good evening, Board of Education. So Dr. Coffin, our potentially new assistant principal, he is coaching and he is on his way. I can go ahead and just do the introduction, and then if he was to happen to come in, or go ahead, I'll bring him up here very quickly, okay? His spouse is here. That's wonderful, so thank you very much. She's here, so that's wonderful. Ms. Wallace, thank you. All right. No. Thank you. Well, good evening. Since our last time together, the February 11th Board of Education meeting, I've had a chance to finalize and wrap up yet another important mid-year administrative hire. You will see that within the consent agenda later this evening for your consideration and hopefully your anticipated approval. If he was here, I would introduce to you and have him walk up here, Mr. Leon Wallace, and I'm going to say a few words about Mr. Leon, okay? January 17th, Farmington High School Administration Principal Christine Musner, who's also here tonight, thank you, Christine, and Assistant Principal Linda Shannon began to screen applications, cover letters, and resumes of over 60 applicants in search of a new assistant principal at Farmington High to join an already existing awesome team. From those 63 applicants, 8 were chosen to move on to a first-round video online candidate submission. After the videos, interviews were carefully screened down to 3 candidates that moved forward to a second in-person round that was held with a stakeholder group of 9 staff members from Farmington High School. After this, the building round, they moved 2 final candidates onto a Cabinet Plus, which is our leadership team. We interviewed those 2, and then, of course, rounding out the process as we moved 1 final candidate forward for a final 4th round interview back at the building with Mrs. Shannon and Mrs. Musner. I'm happy to introduce to you that tonight I bring forward to you Mr. Leon Wallace, as he's selected for the final candidate for the new assistant principal position at Farmington High. In every round of the interviews, there was a very consistent theme from Leon to all of his answers were being very positive when it comes to an adult influence for kids, and most importantly, just a consummate relationship builder for our high school age children. Leon holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Information Systems and a Master's in Educational Leadership from Marygrove College. He has been working with students since 1991, starting as a paraprofessional for Highland Park Public Schools and working his way to his most current position as a Dean of Student Support for the Plymouth Canton Community Schools. And so if he was here, I would say, Leon, on behalf of Dr. Coffin and the leadership team, I guess I'll say this to his spouse. I want to say thank you for your newfound commitment in Farmington Public Schools, and you're joining a fantastic administration team, and we're just certainly very proud and hopeful that as we move forward into the future, we're doing all the right things for our kids, and we're certainly happy to have Leon and your family join us in our Farmington Public Schools community of staff members. So please feel free in joining and congratulating Mr. Leon Wallace as being recommended to you as the new assistant principal for Farmington High School. Thanks, Dr. Coffin.
Your timing is impeccable.
So, Leon, I did a nice introduction to you and to the Board of Education. We were well aware of your timing here this evening, so we're just certainly happy to have you. This is Dr. Coffin and our Board of Education, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck, and thanks for joining our Farmington family.
Thank you.
Okay, Leon, thank you.
Dr. Kaufman and the Board of Ed, I would like to just thank you for allowing me this opportunity to serve in your community as assistant principal at Farmington High School. I'm excited to get started, and I can't wait to continue the work that I've already done here in Farmington Schools.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to welcoming you.
All right, just a few more things, President Weems, after that, and congratulations and welcome. We're thrilled you're here with us. This week is going to be an action-packed week, including a Parent Connect meeting with Michigan Alliance that just recently wrapped up. We have a Parent 504 and MTSS workshop coming up, the Wood Creek Inquiry Fair and STEM Night, the HBCU College Fair that was coordinated by Mr. Greg Smith, Farmington Early Childhood Center Open House for our new families, our spring coaches meeting, FAPN Guest Reader Day this Saturday, and the first competition of the season for our Hackbox team. Finally, we hope that our families are enjoying the One School, One Book clues so far. You can join in the fun this Thursday, February 27th at the downtown branch of Farmington Community Library, where this year's book is going to be revealed. Fun activities are planned, including cuddling with therapy dogs and making an origami dog. Hint, hint, that might help people know what the book is. That's all I have for my update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move to reports from board committees, and I will ask that Dr. Turner give a report on the Policy Board Governance Committee. And then Do you have a report for the Community Engagement Committee?
We were going to wait until the Facilities and Finance Committee meet to discuss the information that Dr. Coffin got from the architect.
That will definitely be part of the Finance Committee, but did you want to report on, like, future plans for the community engagement?
Not at this time.
Okay, we'll wait. All right. Dr. Turner?
Thank you. So the Policy and Governance Committee met on February 21st, last week. Yeah, the weeks are running together. President was myself and Ms. Williams. Ms. Smith was not in attendance. And we discussed 4 major items, and I want to discuss them briefly here with you all in my report. The first item was a Miller-Johnson response that we received regarding Title IX changes to the policy and administrative regulations. We had changes to Policy 8008 on discrimination and harassment back in October of 2024. We received an update in June of 2024, made adopted changes in October of 2024. After that, subsequent to that, Miller-Johnson, our policy provider, gave us an update regarding regulations and changes that were coming down the pipeline. The court actually issued a vacatur, which is basically the rule itself is no longer in operation because of the law changes and administrative changes that happened. Nonetheless, they gave recommendations that we may want to revisit our policy and look at re-implementing our 2020 administrative regulations and any changes to the subsequent policy that it supports, which is 8007. As it stands currently today, our current policy, in our opinion, is good, and we are going to continue to wait and see if there's a need to change it. If additional recommendations come down from the Department of Education and/or executive orders, we will enact them and align ourselves with the law as needed. The second section was a follow-up on the N-word and stakeholder discussions that we had related to those situations and our future response. I'm going to give the future response today. As I took over the policy committee, I was able to receive information and look at the work that had been done by former Chair Walker, and just a little bit of the backdrop. In January and February of 2024, the district had a couple high-profile instances of what the community walked away with as racist rhetoric in our district and from our staff. The policy committee chose to review its current policy to determine if it needed to adjust that policy regarding racial slurs and/or language. We received the policy, examined it, and then, of course, we then held community sessions where we got feedback and took that in as well. As I looked at all of that information and make recommendation from the policy chair C, I do believe that our current policy and our administrative regulations are fortified to the fact that they can handle, and our structures allow us to handle and mitigate discipline if needed in those situations and under the scenarios that came forth. I would like to close out this matter as it relates to the policy examination. I would charge the district, obviously, to hold steadfast to those regulations and administrative guidelines and dispense discipline as appropriate to students and/or staff who find themselves in violation of said policies and regulations. If similar instances do arise, I'm sure they'll become before this board, and we'll handle them under our current policies and administrative regulations. The third policy was a new policy relative to student data privacy. We reached out actually to Miller-Johnson about a potential new policy with respect to student data privacy, and did we need to really strengthen it around AI tools and some of the technologies that are on the way. There's many new startups and brand new companies that are not meeting our standards as it relates to how they manage and protect our student data. So our IT department, IT team wants to develop a data privacy policy and an agreement and have it in place for our vendors. Once they engage with us, that they would have to follow our stringent rules and regulations before we engage in business with them. So we've also asked Miller-Johnson to give us any guidance that they have relative to those recommendations, and as we receive them, we'll develop policy and bring forward. The last thing is just really future agenda items. We're going to provide updates on policy 8008 in the future, and again, continue to review our positive culture handbook and again, review graduation requirements, specifically as it relates to extracurricular activities and how those extracurricular activities can count toward physical education credits and the like. So some new and exciting stuff along the way. Hopefully policy changes that do come up relative to these areas of research we'll bring forward through the Policy Council Committee and bring forward to the board for consideration. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments before we move on? We will then move on to discussion items. The first item is Japanese textbook adoption.
Thank you. I would like to welcome Nanette Suarez, K-12 Data and Assessment Coordinator, as well as Courtney Copeland and Lauren Kendall, our Japanese educators, to the podium to present a request to the board for approval of new textbooks and resources.
Hi, so on the first slide, you'll see, I'm not Margaret. I am the Data and Assessment Coordinator, but, and some of you know, in my previous life, before I left the classroom, I was in the World Language Department, and so I continue that relationship and advocate for my colleagues. And so today we have Courtney and Lauren here to talk about the Japanese textbook. Last year we talked about getting a new French 1 and 2 and 3, and the previous year was Spanish. And so we're just moving along in that department, because as you recall, we are looking for textbooks that match the instructional push of our language department, making sure that we are using things and we're not just memorizing vocabulary lists, that these are happening in context, and the grammar is also in the context of real conversations. And so why we need a new textbook is to help us move towards that. There's also, we keep talking about authenticity in the core subjects. We also want authenticity in world language. And we already do some problem-based learning within the languages, and obviously we want the cross-cultural connections too. So I'm gonna let the experts, Courtney and Lauren, go ahead and talk.
Good evening, board members. I'm Lauren Kendall.
I'm Courtney Copeland.
And we're just really stoked to talk about this new textbook. We've actually been using bits and pieces of it because it's just such a good textbook. It's aligned with ACTFL, which is the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages. So it gives us just a really big broadness and a depth of activities that we can do for our students. And also with the textbook, it allows us to really just kind of get into the nitty gritty and like get a little bit more creative with what we're doing, as opposed to, you know, things like making copies and binding, which is what we really love to do. But what we really love to do is we really love to teach, and we really love to have these student connections with each other and with us. So some of the things that are like real good features of this textbook are the kids know what they're going to be able to do by the time they're done with it. So these can-do statements, which are, aligned in pretty much all districts. What are the students able to do when they're done? They have extensive, in case you didn't know, if you're looking through the textbooks right now, it's not in English, obviously, but there are extensive practices for students who are actually learning a non-alphabetic language, which we find integral to their achievement in Japanese language. And then finally, they are authentic. So things that Japanese people would pick up and read, they're exercises that are leveled to their level, which allows them to have relevant type of context. So what Japanese people are actually doing, what they're actually saying, how they're actually interacting with each other. And we just find it so necessary to our teaching as a whole, to make things a lot easier on us and to make things much easier on them.
Next one. Okay, so this gives you the highlights. It is a very communication-based textbook series. It also starts with level 1 and it progresses through level 3 and then progresses onto an AP level textbook, which would work for AP as well as IB. So we're looking forward to helping our students get further, especially when they're looking for fluency. The connection with ACTFL and the Common Core and the 5 Cs for world languages, the authentic activities. It also has a component, an online component, which gives students access to pronunciation practice, as well as everything that's in the textbook in color and at home and at their fingertips 24/7.
Any questions for us?
Yeah, I just have a comment and some questions too, but I just was in the community doing, anyways, a social activity, but talking to a family and their son is in college and studying in Japan right now because he fell in love with Japanese at Farmington Public Schools. So, yeah, so good job to you. And it's just one of my daughter's friends years ago, because she's quite old now, but I mean, fell in love with Japanese also through Farmington Public Schools and, you know, has a career with Japanese. So it's just filling a need. I do have a question though. I mean, we have 1, 2, and 3, so what about the 4th year? Do we offer a 4th year?
We do, as well as AP and IB. The amount of content in those 3 levels will get us through 4 years easily.
Oh, okay, all right, so
They're
that's
very,
covered.
very deep.
It's not like
And-
book one is only in
No,
year
not
one.
at all.
Some of it will carry over, like some of the end of book one will actually be in year 2.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to hog. So, and the other question then, so is this part of the IB curriculum also? Or is it, because we have IB Spanish, and that's what I was wondering, if a student wants an IB diploma, can they take Japanese as their language?
They can at Farmington, yeah.
Okay.
We do have an IB class, junior and senior classes
Okay.
at Farmington. It's mostly homebrew materials. I'm sorry, you probably don't know Dungeons and Dragons. It's essentially just self-created through lots of authentic resources. But yes, while it's not necessarily aligned with IB, a lot of AP and IB does kind of mesh together.
Okay.
So it can be used for the IB classes. And that would probably be when that 4th textbook would be something that we would look into.
Right, and this might be more of a curricular question, but I know that students can start a foreign language in middle school in 8th grade.
Yes.
Is that Japanese available to our middle school students also?
Yep.
Yes.
Level 1.
Level 1, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Yep.
So for after their 3rd or 4th or 3rd year, what's their fluency level? Is it something that they just can read, or can they actually speak it, or can they just kind of like get a couple of words out of it? What's their fluency level generally for high school after?
It really depends on the student, so we'll start with that. But generally, in terms of ACTFL, they're probably going to be at around a novice high level of Japanese, and an intermediate low. And the only reason why I say that is because they have that mountain of the language, the hiragana and katakana characters that they have to learn first. And so that takes up a small amount of time during their first year to learn. So I would say probably they can hold conversations. They're asking and answering questions. They're analyzing texts, be it a visual stimuli or a reading or listening to something and giving feedback. So generally, they're probably around like sentence, getting into a paragraph level of conversation, reading, and all sorts of discourse.
To give you a comparison, according to ACTFL, it's 22 weeks for a Spanish class to a basic level of fluency. It's 88 in Japanese. It's roughly 4 times longer to get that same level of fluency. So if you're mentally comparing to like what a student can do after 4 years of Spanish, that's nothing compared. Japanese is going to be maybe in sound like 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
May I add something? Yes. Just to clarify, my understanding is that is because Japanese is so different. It's not like the other languages that our students are studying. It's not alphabet-based.
Correct.
Could you speak to that a little bit to help us understand?
How do you do this?
Yeah, so one of the things that we make sure that our
Visual
students do
aids.
is, yeah, that's what we need. We're teachers at the end of the day. Essentially, what we have to do is we have to prime the students to be able to read in Japanese. And to do that, we have to teach them the basic characters. Now, there are 26 characters in the English alphabet, and you can mix them all up to make words. There are 46 characters in Japanese. It's a sound base. So you put the sounds together, the sounds make words. So we have to get them to a level that they're able to read all of the sounds, while also teaching them general conversation techniques. So it's different when you're having to take the character that you see, translate it into a sound, translate that word into a meaning, and then do the reverse when you want to like do an utterance or something. So say if I wanted to do like red, for example, I have to kind of translate the word aka, which is red in Japanese. I'd have to translate it into the Roman characters, then translate it into English, then translate it back into Japanese for any sort of response. So as Courtney was saying, it takes, and this is also from the State Department, for fluency in language, it takes about 3 times as long, simply because there are not just the hiragana and katakana characters, but Chinese-based characters, which are called kanji. So that requirement is much higher, whereas a student that takes Spanish or French, they can essentially read out of the gate even if they don't necessarily know what they're looking at.
Because it's the Romance language, as the former Spanish teacher, it's the Romance language. So I don't have to go through and teach them the alphabet or the numbers. I can just say, this is how we say one in Spanish, right? Like, I can go through, whereas these two have to like start at the basics.
Yeah, it's such a completely different construct of language that the students have to become familiar with.
We spend a lot of time practicing our characters.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and one of the things I noticed in these textbooks, it really talks about the Japanese culture too, and life in
Yes.
Japan and things like that. Is that something that you've always done, or is this, okay, so
Yeah.
you're doing a
So
good job with that?
you can't have the language necessarily without the culture. So the language is culturally embedded. There are a lot of things in Japanese that you say simply because it's the culture that does it. And so we are always looking for new ways to integrate culture and integrate cultural awareness into our students to create more globally minded citizens in the future, so that they can essentially go anywhere and have an empathetic mind towards others when it comes to, you know, language barriers or you know, different ways of doing things. And so we've always been a big proponent of keeping culture as relevant in any aspect that we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This will come up for a vote in our next, thank you, Thomas. In our next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move now to our next agenda item, which is the MASB Board of Directors election. The MASB, Michigan Association of School Boards, needs to elect its new board of directors. The MASB is divided up into 8 regions. We are Region 8, which covers Macomb, ISD, Oakland Schools, and Wayne-Risa. There are 8 candidates up for a 3-year term to represent our region. A lot of information was provided on these 8 candidates by MASB themselves. Each of the candidates presented their bio. That was presented to us or provided to us. MASB also hosted an interview session. I watched that. I think it was 4 candidates made it to that interview. Each were asked the same questions. And in addition to that, many of the candidates sent emails to each of us with some additional information. We will need to vote on this today. Yep. So the ask is that we have a discussion now about the candidates so that we can maybe narrow it down for purposes of coming to a vote when we get to action items. Are there any comments or feedback? Mrs. Heinrich.
Yeah, I went on the website and I did some research on, as far as who's on the MASB Board of Directors. And based on that and based on the bios and the interviews, I have identified, I guess, my top 2 or my top 3. One of the things that I noticed was, I know that Birgit McQuiston, I'm mispronouncing her last name, but anyway, she's Lake Orion Public Schools, which is Oakland County ISD, and Mark Siegler also is on Walled Lake, and he's on the Board of Directors, which is Oakland County ISD. In addition to that, there's gentleman from Pontiac, Gil Garrett, is the NSBA director, and so represents Oakland County. And Stephen Heyer is from Clarkston and also represents Oakland County. So Oakland County already has 4 representatives on the board of directors. And with that in mind, I was kind of looking at candidates that weren't based in Oakland County, just to have more representation. On the ISD Board of Directors, there's one from Macomb County, an SBA president, Don Hubler, and then there's also one from Detroit Public Schools, LaPrice McClendon, Detroit Public Schools, and so that's Wayne County. And so I was looking at, I guess 2 of them popped out to me. Roderick Means, and he's Westwood, which is in Wayne County, and he's got 28 years of experience. One of the things that I liked about him was he's served on numerous MASB committees. He's has all of the certifications that you can get, and he's also advocacy certified and data and finance certification also, all through the Platinum and President's Awards and things like that. And he's advocates for equitable funding. He supports professional development for educators, integrating technology. He just had a nice resume. They asked if they had enough time, and he said he's willing to use his vacation time. Oh, and also he's been a 2-time presenter at the MASB conferences, and he moderates at the conferences. And so he's highly engaged and involved, and so he kind of rose to the top. And the other one that I looked at was Paul Combe, and he's a 10-year board member, and he's 7 years of conferences. He's advocacy in Washington, D.C., the equity. He's very knowledgeable of MASB mission and vision resources. He's got a skill set to support MASB. He's data-driven questions, which I really liked about that. He's Bloomfield Hills, which is Oakland County. So, I mean, balancing my 2 top choices, I think I would have a tendency to get a little bit more representation from the other ISDs. It's just my personal opinion. And then I guess so. I guess I would just talk about my 2 top choices and see what other people had to say.
Any other feedback? Thank you for that, for summarizing that. I think that there is a lot of information in front of us. I'm sorry, did someone have?
Yeah, I was going to say, what were your thoughts on Scott Wallace?
Which one?
Scott Wallace, Fraser Public Schools.
8 years. Yep. He's been on a MASB legislative committee for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And he's got 8 years and certified, and that's the only thing that I picked up on him. I didn't see a whole lot more that I made notes on.
Well,
so I'm interested to hear what.
So my thinking is that being on the MASB board is a way to become more involved in MASB, and depending upon one's life situation, one might not have time to do all of those things simultaneously. While he's been president of his board for the last 3 years, but he's been on the board for 9, I believe. He's served in multiple roles on his board. Currently a master board member with the data certification. He's been on the MASB Legislative Committee. He's been his board's representative at the annual delegate conference for all 9 years, and the representative at of the ISD's Legislative Committee for the past 3 years. So it seems to me that he has, a wide range of experiences already to bring to this role. And one of my concerns is, getting new people involved at this level. You know, I can't remember which of the two you said has been a board member for 28 years.
20 years. Yeah, I mean, he's been on MASB committees, but he hasn't been on representative. So, I mean, one way for, you know, if one way to get involved before being a region representative is to serve on committees. And so to gain experience that way. So, yeah, because the question is like, how do you gain experience? And then, you know, how do you gain experience? Whereas the one that floated at the top, to me, gained experience by serving on committees and be involved in MASB and you know, participating in conferences, presenting, moderating, things like that. So yeah, so he's dug his heels in and has a lot to offer. And it's just, it has never been so that's just what rose to the top. Whereas, where is Fraser, is that?
Can I pause you just for a second? So you brought up two great candidates.
Okay.
You've brought up another candidate. Is there anyone else who wants to bring up a candidate?
I would, Dr. Nishahana, out of Pontiac. I've known her through various circles, and I know her dedication, her work. She's currently the Pontiac School Board President, and has been there, I think, 4 or 5 years. Strong advocate for students, all of the things they need and are represented through the other candidates, and I want to put her in the hunt as well.
And Gil Garrett is an SBA director, and he is also from Pontiac. So Pontiac does have representation.
Are there any other candidates? So it sounds like we've got 4
Yep.
that we want to think through, so that narrows it down from 8. That's very good. I would just add that I think all of these folks had something to contribute. As I was walking through the list, I had in my mind that, you know, selfishly, I was looking for some representation from Oakland County. I'm glad that you did the research to help us understand that we may already have some of that. That makes me feel a little bit better. When I took a look at the list, and I did a little bit of work myself and sent each of you a summary of all of the candidates and which ones did an interview, I had the benefit of watching each of the interviews, and I think that just based off of that, it looked to me like Roderick Means sort of rose to the top in my opinion, so I wasn't surprised to hear you say that. I do think that, you know, there is something to be said for experience, but when somebody's been on a board for about 28 years, I think that, I don't think that I would have an issue with them getting acclimated to a new office. But that said, I think I could support any of the candidates that have been brought up. So, are there thoughts from any other board members?
Well, and, you know, my concern with Dr. Hannah is I thought she had too narrow of a focus. Whereas being a Region 8 representative in MASB, you have to represent the whole state. And she's doing a good job. I mean, I have a respect for the work she's doing. But everything she said was just lasered in on supporting Pontiac through MASB, which I think can be done. And they do have a Pontiac representative there, so.
Yep, doesn't sway me. Good feedback.
You know, without knowing, the only one I know personally is Kristen through Oakland County School Board Association, and she's, you know, she was on the ISD Board of Directors for years and years, and, you know, really represented well there, and she represents well at the MASB level. And so I just, you know, I'm hoping, and so I guess one of my reasoning for bringing someone from another ISD is to have that representation so that they can take that back to to more, you know, their expertise and more representative for more school districts.
Any other feedback? Okay, so we have a couple of ways of doing this. We could call for a recommendation or a motion, and we can vote on that motion, and we can keep doing that until we have a majority. Or we could each individually vote and move all of those to the chair, and whomever receives out of the four, we can narrow it down to the four that have been discussed today, whoever receives the most votes could win. Is there some, can we get to consensus on how we'd like to move forward? Does anybody have a preference for either way?
I'm fine either way.
Okay.
I kind of like writing down our top
I like that one
choice
too.
rather than, you know, voting somebody up or down or sort of thing. It's just that way. I guess if you write down your top choice, then everybody has equal say in making the motion.
Yep.
And then, you know, hopefully a candidate will rise to the top and then we can move to do that. So, I mean, I kind of thank you for thinking that through and, you know, coming up with those options, because that's why I really wanted to have a discussion before having it as an action item, because I really wanted to talk about pros and cons and get a feel for what people think about the candidates.
Sure. So just to be clear, when it comes to action, we are going to vote each of us for one of these four individuals. And I'll remind you when we get to this. Either Scott Wallace, who represents Fraser Public Schools, or Roderick Means, who represents Westwood Community School District in Wayne County, or Paul Collin, who represents Bloomfield Hills Schools in Oakland County, or Anisha Hanna, who represents Pontiac School District in Oakland County. So each of you will get a piece of paper, and I would ask that you write your name, because we will need for the record who votes for whom, and we will pass that to the chair, who will read each of the votes, and whoever receives the most votes will then go on to, we'll send that person's name on behalf of Farmington Public Schools.
For public record, do we have to put our name for who we're selecting?
Yes, I'm sorry, so your name and the person that you are selecting, yes. All right, that sounds like a good way to move forward. Great. All right, next, we will move to the resolution for fully funding IDEA. I mentioned this at our last meeting, that we were asked to consider a resolution calling for full permanent funding of IDEA, which is related to disability funding.
I can speak to this if you'd like.
No worries, I can read it. So whereas public education is the cornerstone of our democracy, providing fundamental skills and opportunity to children across the United States, and in the decade following the Great Recession, students across the U.S. lost nearly $600 billion from the state's disinvestment in their public schools, and prior to COVID, both state and federal funding for public schools was already failing to meet the critical needs of students across the country. And since the pandemic, students have needed additional academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs being met through targeted programming and additional personnel, enhanced professional development opportunities, new technology, as well as critical updates to school facilities. And research has consistently shown that increased educational funding positively affects academic performance, graduation rates, and future earnings. Where Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed in 1974, the federal government committed to pay 40% of the average per pupil expenditure for special education to ensure that every child with a disability has access to a high-quality education. And the financial pledge for IDEA has never been met and is currently funded at approximately 10.7%, leaving a gap of billions of dollars needed for students. And our school district is proud to serve a student population that includes many students with disabilities. When Farmington Public Schools cost to deliver important services required under IDEA are not properly funded by the federal government, it requires us to reallocate money from other programs to make up for it. Federal underfunding has negatively impacted the academic opportunities for all students for generations, not just those with disabilities. Therefore, be it resolved that our school district calls for Congress to immediately pass for full funding, which would create a 10-year mandatory path to fully fund IDEA. And we call on the state legislator to provide adequate, equitable, and sustainable funding increases to districts to mitigate the harm caused by decades of underfunded schools. I wanted to make sure that I read that out loud so you knew what that resolution was calling for and that you could make any adjustments you saw necessary and figure out if you guys wanted to have any discussion related to this matter. If there is consensus, we would bring this back at our next meeting for action. Yes.
I just wanted to highlight that it has been 50 years since the federal government mandated this legislation, and 50 years since the federal government has continually, every single year, failed to meet its promise of funding these services at a level of 40%. And as President Weems pointed out, we're now around a 10 to 11% of the 40. This is something that several of us on this board have been to Washington, D.C. over multiple years to advocate for the full funding of IDEA, and all of our students stand to benefit because in order to make sure that we are in keeping with this legislated mandate, we must find the dollars to provide these services for our students who have various needs. That money, in absence of the money from the federal government, we need to take that out of our general fund. So fully funding IDEA from the federal level would bring us back additional dollars that we could use for all students in our district, not only for those who have special needs. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you.
Just a special note, Ms. Weems in her reading admitted many of the whereases that are customary in resolutions. They are there, so when you see them, she did not read them, she just chose to omit them. That's the secretary in me, and the parliamentarian in me.
Thank you.
They have purpose.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you had a misyear. The IDA was passed in 1975. You said 74.
Oh, did I? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's 50 years. But yeah, I just want to point out, as a general, we have a policy that we don't pass resolutions or adopt resolutions. I think this is an exception because this resolution is strictly related to education and the work of the business of the school district, which is providing education for all students. And whether we're funded by the federal government or not funded by the federal government, we educate all students with special needs and students with disability. And so we have been advocating in Lansing for 50 years, probably, but, you know, I'm just, since I've been on the board, have been gone to do that. But it just really, every dollar that we don't get from these federal mandates is dollars that takes away from every student in the school district and the general population. And so I think it's really important, especially at this time with our political climate, to really make a strong statement and support fully funding this. And I'm hoping that all of the school districts across the United States will send the same message and send a strong message.
Thank you. Yes.
So in just everyday language that I'm asking, this is a resolution for us to ask for what is owed to us?
Yes.
Interesting. So by doing this, we're saying, hey, this is a bill that you guys supposed to have been paying for the last 50 years, and you're underfunding us, so please show us our funding for that.
And we're joining other districts throughout the state and throughout the nation.
Right, for the promise to be kept.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
For the next 10 years.
The next 10 years.
For the next 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't ask to fund it next year. We gave them 10 years to bring it up. And, you know, it has increased, I mean, in the past years, but not enough. And I thought, it seems to me, Dr. Blau, when we were there, they like had a resolution to bring it up to a certain, not the 40%, but bring it up to maybe 10%? Maybe that was it, or?
No, and it has been, the percentage has been higher in the past. There have been times when it was as much as 18%.
Oh, really?
12%,
Okay.
or 14%. It's fluctuated
Okay.
over the 50 years, but it's never been anywhere close to the 40%. I don't, maybe Dr. Coffin has something.
That's correct.
Okay. And who determines the average per pupil expenditure for special education?
We will ask our business office to update that.
Okay, so I mean, so when we say that federal government will pay 40%, does every district have a different cost, or is the 40%?
They would have different, depending on the number of students served.
Oh, the number of students served, so we say these are our students
Say what our
served,
cost is.
this is what our cost, and then we apply for our reimbursement. So right now, we say this is our cost, and they reimburse us approximately 10%. Okay, so now we hope to be reimbursed by 40%. All right, thank you for that clarification. So it's not a flat dollar amount.
And this is a statement that we're making. It's not as if this will result in us getting funding over the next 10 years.
No.
Adding our
Congress-
voices.
Yes.
Yes, they need to work together in order to make that happen.
Okay, so it sounds like there's enough interest in bringing this back to the board for action. So this will be on the agenda for our next board meeting, March 11th, I believe it is, as an action item. Thank you, board, for that. Okay, that brings us to our next public comment period. If anyone is interested in public comment, members of the community are welcome to address the board. They will have 10 minutes. There will be a timer that will display the minute countdown. Please address your comments to the board and speak directly into the microphone that is on the podium. If your comment is related to a student or a staff member, please use caution in stating names of individuals where protection of privacy would be appropriate. The board will respectfully listen, but generally, the board does not respond to public comment. In some cases, it might be appropriate for someone to follow up with you to address concerns. We first have Melissa Francis, followed by Robert Francis, and then Chris Dianchi. Those are the 3 comment cards that I have.
Good evening, board members. I'm actually here reading something for Henry. He's not feeling well tonight, so keeping that to himself. Good evening, board members and Dr. Coffin. Sorry that I can't be here tonight. I'm unfortunately feeling under the weather, so I asked my mom to read what I would normally say. As you may remember, I emailed earlier this week regarding Hackbot's first competition. We're excited to have many of you join us, and we hope that you'll get a better idea of the scale of competition that we participate in and get a chance to see our robot up close in the pit. I also wanted to thank the district for working with us to make the first clue for One School, One Book. We always love working with kids in the district, and this was a really great opportunity to get them involved with STEM and reach out to a lot of kids across the district. As always, I do want to make it known that I'm here not only to update you, but to advocate for my team. Last week, we had multiple 10 hours going up to a 14-hour day at the high school, working on getting our robot ready and to the point that it can compete well against other teams at our competition. We did our best to use the space we have. However, our calibration may be inaccurate to the real field setup, as we haven't been able to test in a real space yet. I hope that when you see us this weekend, you understand why we need more space and why I'm so passionate about this team and why I can't stop advocating. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Robert Francis.
Thank you, and good evening, board members. Similarly, I'm here to share a little bit about the competition this weekend, and we welcome everyone to come witness it firsthand. If you're unable to make it, I highly encourage you to Google Reefscape. One word, Reefscape, and you'll get a sense of what it's all about and what these kids have prepared for so diligently for the past 2 months. I also wanted to make a shout out to what I think might be the student that was aforementioned regarding the Japanese textbooks, and if it's the same person, I think it is. This is a student that was with the Hackbots his entire senior or high school career, I would say, and traveled with us each of the last 3 times to the World Championship in Houston. So big shout out to him. If you're able to make it, I would highly encourage you to look at what you witnessed through the lens of a sports team, not something STEM related. Having spent a lot of the time the past 2 months working with the team and shuffling things up and down the hallway at the high school to try and set up and test as much as we can with field elements that we build. Look at that field when you see it, either on the Google video or live at the competition. We essentially tried to build at least half of that and maneuver it around the schools. Last night we were jockeying around the high school baseball team in the hallway who was doing sprints, and you know, I would argue our kids were sweating a little bit more than even them. Yeah. Our kids can earn a varsity letter. And as I'm reminded every time I come in to work with these kids, from the sign that came from Harrison High School, there's a 1997 team, the RoboHawks. So we've been around a long time, 1997. But the one thing we lack still is a space to compete and practice in. So, you know, I really just encourage you to look at the parallels that you see in everything that goes into it. I think if you look at the definition of a sport, it is something where you have to exert physical energy. Lifting a 125-pound robot will exert certainly a lot of physical energy, as will the actual fabrication that goes into it. So there is a physical aspect. I know it's not all the time, witnessed at every single moment of it, but really it demonstrates all the same aspects, maybe other than the constant physical exertion part. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Dianchi. If there's anyone else who is interested in public comment, please fill out the comment form. I have no further public comment after this next public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think so. I just wanted to comment on the board resolution for fully funding II.A. The National Education Association and Michigan Education Association have been calling for a fully funding of II.A. as well. I believe, Dr. Blavin, you might have mentioned the highest it's ever been funded was 18%, and that was in 2005. The year I was hired as a special education teacher here in the district. That was the most funding we received for II.A. And unlike non-public schools, we welcome everyone, and we take care of all of our students. And we take that as an added expense because it is the right thing to do. And so I would encourage anyone who is listening or watching or in the crowd today, you can go to fulfillthepromise.net and sign on a petition to fully fund II.A. It is the 10-year plan, just like you talked about in the resolution. Ms. Weems, you can go to fulfillthepromise.net and you can send something directly to whoever your senator or your legislators are and tell them and ask them to fully fund II.A. There were 2 pieces of legislation that have been introduced that would meet that promise that haven't gotten movement. So anyone who wants to go to fulfillthepromise.net, put in their information and ask them to pass these bills so that we can fully fund II.A. so that the district has the resources they need to meet everyone's needs within the district for all of our 9,000 plus students. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Any further public comment? Seeing no further public comment, the public comment period is now closed, and we will now move to action items. The first item is related to the tech bond, specifically structured cabling proposal. Is there a motion? Mrs. Heinrich?
I move that the Board of Education award for the tech bond structured cabling bid in the amount of $439,246 to Complete Interactive Technologies Incorporated, CIT. This project will be funded from the Capital Projects Building and Site 2020 Fund as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Heinrich, seconded by Dr. Turner, to approve the award for the tech bond structured cabling bid in the amount of $439,246 to Complete Interactive Technologies, funds to come from the Capital Projects Building and Site 2020 Fund. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Ms. Heinrich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Myself, yes. President Williams?
Yes. Thank you.
And this motion carries.
Thank you. We will now move to the MASB Board of Directors nomination. We are moving that the Board of Education cast its ballot for whomever receives the most votes for the MASB Board of Directors, as we will have a written vote here in a second, and we will authorize the Superintendent's office to submit that ballot. Can we have a motion to approve that process? Motion?
A motion that the Board of Education cast its ballot for Jason Barbridge, Anisha Hanna, Paul Collin, Roderick Means, Randall Meeser, Scott Wallace, Ursula Wester, Rogers, or Lisa Valeria Noack for the MASB Board of Directors Region 8 election, and authorize the Superintendent's Office Executive Assistant to submit the ballot.
Point of order. My recommendation would be that we submit the names, read the names, insert the names, read the motion again with the proper name in place.
I agree with that.
Yep.
So since there was no second, if everyone agrees with that,
Yeah.
we can move.
What's the point of order? Doesn't.
Yeah.
No.
Well, he made a motion, so
I think you asked for a motion for the process, not for the person.
I did.
Okay.
So I'm okay
So-
with that. Do you want to make a motion
So,
for that?
Yeah, so I move that the process for nominating a candidate for the Region 8 Board of Directors will be that each board member will write the name of their candidate's choice on the purple piece of paper and put the board member's name on for public record of who you are recommending, and passing that to President Weems, who will sort the ballots, and then I guess you have to read all of and President Weems will read all of the ballots for public record.
So I withdraw my motion.
You don't have to because it wasn't seconded, but we need a second for this one.
A second.
That was kind of long.
Okay,
You
so
get all
yes.
that?
Motion made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Dr. Blau, outlining the process for how we will vote for MASB Board of Directors Region 8. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, one abstention. Well, since we have an abstention, we should have a roll call vote.
Not abstention, it's opposed. But
I mean opposed, since we have one person opposed, let's do a roll call so that we're clear.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Heinrich?
Yes.
I myself, no. Ms. Williams?
Yes, so motion passes. Thank you very much. So if everyone could write their person and send it down, I will be reading your name and the name of the person that you voted for so that we can have a record of how each board member voted. Dr. Turner is voting for Anisha Hanna. Mrs. Heinrich is voting for Roderick Means. Mrs. Weems voting for Roderick Means. Mr. Hull is voting for Roderick Means. And Dr. Blau is voting for Scott Wallace. So there is one vote for Mrs. Hannah, there is one vote for Scott Wallace, and there are 3 votes for Roderick Means, which means that Roderick Means is the person who will be submitted by Farmington Public Schools.
Point of order,
Yes.
since 3 votes isn't a quorum, should we have a motion and vote on one candidate? Yes or no?
That was actually my
We
point.
should, yeah, you're actually right. Yeah, so now we need a motion on Roderick Means.
Or we have a, yeah, hopefully.
Yes. Would you like to make that motion and insert Roderick Means?
Oh, so, okay, gotcha. All right, so I second motion. I move the board of Education in Kansas ballot for Roderick Means for the MASB Board of Directors, Region A election, and authorize the Superintendent's Office Executive Assistant to submit the ballot.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hull, seconded by Dr. Turner. What?
Like, what's his name? David.
All right. Right, what? For the MASB Board of Directors Region 8 election and authorize the Superintendent's Office to submit the ballot. Any discussion? All in favor? You want to do a roll call vote? Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Heinrich.
Yes.
Mr. Hull.
Yes.
Dr. Blau.
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems.
Yes. All right.
Unanimous, the vote passes.
Thank you. That vote passes. All right. So that takes care of both of our action items. Now we will move to items from the treasurer.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education approve the expenditures as outlined in the expenditure printout dated February 25th, 2025 as follows. General Fund, $14,607,337. General Fund Athletics, $129,377. Capital Projects 2020 Bond Fund, $868,091. Nutrition Services Fund, $484,782. Benefit Stabilization Fund, $1,503,648. Total, $17,593,235.
Support.
Motion made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Dr. Turner, to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Next, the consent agenda. Mrs. Heinrich?
I move to approve the consent agenda. A, approval of minutes. Number 1, February 11th, 2025 regular meeting. Number 2, February 21, 2025 Policy Board Governance Committee meeting. B, Head Start Director's monthly report. C, personnel items. D, Farmington High School Assistant Principal hire recommendation.
Support.
Motion made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Dr. Turner, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions? That motion passes as well. Are there any reports from board representatives? Seeing none, we will now adjourn. Thank you.